the finished product is supposed to look something like this. What opportunities do we see to create components out of this? What components could we break this into? Yeah, John. The list of notes. Seems like a good component. What else? Yeah, Lily. The sidebar over here. Sounds good. So we have the sidebar, the list of notes. What about all this stuff? It's a form, right? So we actually type stuff in. So we can make a component for that. Just basically split the whole thing into 3 components, these vertical slices. And then we could further subdivide those. Like what's one potential subdivision of one of these? What about in the, yeah, go ahead. So we have the list of notes, right? Which is this whole middle section. And then each individual note, that could be a component too. Sounds good. Now we know that eventually there's going to be a whole sign-in page too. So when we're signed out, that's what's going to show. When we're signed in, all this is going to show. So I would also wrap this entire thing in its own component apart from app, because app could render either the sign-in page or this stuff. So I'm going to wrap all this in a component I'm going to call main. So without worrying about any further subdivisions, we need to make a main component, a sidebar component, a note list component, and a note form component. So let's get started, and let's not worry for the moment what they look like or what's in them. Let's just see if we can create those components and get them all to show up on the page. So I'm going to, in my case, just drag the static version off the screen for right now so I don't confuse myself. You can minimize it or whatever if you want. And I'm going to make some components. So in the source directory, that's where all our components live. Make a new file, call it capital M main.js. We name the file exactly the same as the component, capital letter and all. I hate case-sensitive file names, but it does help you tell which ones are components, and absolutely everyone who writes React does this. So it is a very strong convention. Do it. Do not capitalize other file names, but capitalize the names of your components. Main.js. And that's going to be a component. But we're going to make a different kind of component. Previously, we've used classes to create components, right? Classes that inherit from React component, like this. But components can also just be functions. Sometimes you can't use a function if it has its own state. You can't. And there's a couple other circumstances that we won't run into yet today where you also couldn't. But much of the time, they can just be functions. So that's how we're going to do this. We call those stateless functional components. There'll be a lot of links about this on the notes for today. We still need to import React from React. Now, what's the difference between these two? Capital R React with no quotes, lowercase React with quotes. Yes, Lynn? Yeah, so the first part is what we're calling what we import, basically as a local variable to this file. And this is the file we're loading it from. And since we didn't put a path in front of it, it's going to look in node modules, because that's how it works. So the package in node modules is called lowercase r React. But we want to refer to React as capital R React in here. And then let's make our function. And from now on, when we make functions like this, we're going to make them as variables. It's our main component, so we will call it capital M main. So const capital M main. And we're going to assign that an arrow function. That gives us the advantage of arrow functions, which binds this a little differently. Doesn't matter in this particular case, but sometimes it would matter. And it gives us lexical scoping because we use const instead of the function keyword. Now, before I forget, because otherwise I totally will, I'm going to export this. Export default main. Yeah. Now, since this is all one big function and not a class, we don't need a separate render function. This is the render function. So we just need to return some JSX here, and we have ourselves a component. So for right now, let's just return a paragraph that says main, just to prove that it works. So in app.js, to include that on the page, we need to first import it, right? I like to separate imports of stuff that's in the source directory with a line break after the ones that are coming from node modules. So import capital M main from the string with the path to the file. Now I have a Visual Studio Code extension that, as I start typing the path, will show me all the files that are at that path. Not only saves me from making typos, but also tells me pretty quickly if I'm in the wrong directory. Because if I start typing capital N and it doesn't autocomplete main there, I know I've got a problem. And you don't need the .js. Import main from main, which means that I can now just use the main component inside here. So we just make a new element looking thing, capital M main, and we put slash angle bracket Y. What's with that slash?
You have to end every.
Yeah, in XML, every tag must close. So if it's an empty element like image or input or something like that, you make it a self-closing tag. And that's how you do it. A slash before the angle bracket. Self-closing. If all is well, we should see main exclamation mark. And I do. Yay. It's a safe bet we're going to have some styles to apply to that thing. So I'm going to go ahead and make, in the source directory, capital M main.css. I'm not going to put anything in it yet. I'm just going to put it there and import it into main.js so that I don't forget. Import main.css. Why don't I say import something from? Because I don't need to save this to a variable and do something with it later. I just need to import it. I just need to make sure it's there. So that's adequate. Just import the style sheet. And right now, all I'm really hoping is that that didn't break everything. Doesn't look like it did. If I open up my dev tools, no error messages. So I'm good. So now we have a main component. Nothing in it, but hey, it's a start. Add main component